Welcome to the ATA podcast, where we talk to former elite athletes sharing their insights and wisdom derived from successfully transitioning into life beyond the game. A very warm welcome to the Athlete Transition Accelerator. Carl and I are joined by Marc Williams today, a former professional player, a gentleman that's played internationally, under 18s, under 21 levels, played professionally at Wrexham and a variety of clubs. And I know this is going to be a fascinating discussion. So, Marc, a very warm welcome and thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to the conversation.
No, you're very welcome, Marc. Now, for those of us that are familiar with the format, they know that we always go to the same place, but it sets the scene. So we're going to be talking very much about life beyond football and what comes after that particular chapter. But it's always nice to ask our guests to just go back into that sporting chapter and pull out one or two memories that now that you're retired, you look back and it brings a sense of pride. What comes to mind when we ask you that question, Marc, when you look back at your career?
I've probably got three that I really look at, and they're the moments that you'd love to go back to. I think, as you mentioned already, playing internationally, I think representing your country at any age group, it's always a huge honour. And I was fortunate in the sense that, it was in the 16s when I left school, into the 17s, into the 19s, and then into the 21s. And that team, the under 21s, the likes of, Bale, Ramsey, Joe Allen, and a lot of the players that actually went on to do not only great things in their own career, but for Welsh football, just being around that was an amazing experience.
Fabulous.
And also then you travel around the world and it's like, wow, this is unbelievable. So I look back now at the age of 37 and think, wow, that was what an opportunity that was. I think then going into obviously into my own career away from international, I think my first senior hat trick for me was a moment that it was almost like I'd arrived in that particular season. I was close to getting one a few weeks before that. I'd scored two in the last kick of the game. My strike partner, that one where they tap it in over the line just to make sure. We went 3-2. We all celebrated. I said after the game, I said, "Did you have to really?" I said, just in case, just in
Yeah,
case.
yeah.
So I didn't quite get my first senior one on that day, but that year I scored 17 and 20 with Wrexham, and I felt unstoppable. And
Right.
just before the transfer window opened at the racecourse, I got the first senior hat trick, and that moment, it was late in the game, 92nd minute. I'd scored two, we were 4-0 up. And I just charged with the ball. It was like, I'm going through this. And I went through three or four, mazy run, ended up finishing, ran over to the corner to the Wrexham fans. And if there's a moment where I think, I'm here now, I'm one of the main names on the team sheet, I'm delivering every week. And what a feeling that was. I always look back at that moment. Probably now I look back and think I'd love to go back to that moment and have another shot, certainly from that point. And more recently, probably to the ending of my career and probably the moment made me realize, it's time to call it a day. I think it was a moment I'd been chasing since the age of 30 and what I was carrying on playing for. And that was the winning penalty, a year ago, literally to the week against Crusaders in Belfast to put us through to play Legia Warsaw. But that feeling again, it's different, obviously 17 years on from the other feelings, but all the same, them
Yeah.
highs that we chase. But them three for me, when I look back now, that they were magical moments.
Yeah, I love it. And you can feel the energy. This is one of the things Carl and I love when we ask that question to guests. You can just feel the guests come alive. And even though, as you say, 17 years ago, you can feel, and that's
Yeah.
the wonderful thing about sport. Those memories, those chapters, those experiences, they don't go anywhere. And we can always reminisce and look back and enjoy them. And rightly so, you worked hard to get there. Now, obviously moving away from the highs, Marc, one of the things that you'll forgive me for is to dive into some of the challenges that you've had. Now, the reason being for listeners experiencing your story for the first time, you're very candid about it. You pull no punches about it. And it will make sense when we go into the next chapter, which is what we always do with guests, to explore what are they doing now. I think before we frame that and get to that point, you've talked very candidly about struggling with gambling and the addiction to gambling. So could you perhaps just set the scene a little bit for that? You've talked about sort of rock bottom moments, etc., because I know you're not alone. we both admire your bravery of how you've spoken about this, and there will be a huge number of people listening who are either publicly acknowledging this and battling this particular addiction or suffering in silence. So I think your candor and your story will be of inspiration to them. So could you just perhaps set the scene a little bit for that?
Yeah, I mean, gambling for me growing up, it was always fun. It was sociable, like safe, and they're the things gambling should be. And around my family, it was like we had lots of traditions. We'd always have the Grand National Day. My dad would come home with a paper. Christmas morning, we'd have scratch cards to top of our stock. And I mean, you look back now, I'm thinking, did I really need that at the age of 7?
Yeah.
Growing up North Wales on the seaside, we were always in arcades. So that was ingrained in my childhood. Lots of risk and reward, playing cards all the time. And I was doing it with my siblings. I've got 2 older brothers and a sister. We all did it. We all enjoyed it. When we used to go on holiday every year to Lanzarote, we'd always be part of the quiz and bingo night. And like I said, I genuinely loved it. I loved the feeling I got from doing it all. It
Mhm.
gave me that excitement, that rush. And certainly later on in life, then when I left school at 15. I then went into that environment and culture of sport and walking into that building at Colliers Park, Wrexham, and I instantly seen, the betting culture there is within sport. You could see it everywhere, and you just got that feeling that was part of the norm. Everyone did it, everyone spoke about it, you were exposed to it. So as a youth team player, we'd all go as the youth team, think of 20 lads rolling down the high street to go and put on your football accumulators. I mean, you can't even gamble on football. Not a lot of education back then. We'd go and put a couple of pound on. Then you'd see the fixed odd betting terminals. Next minute, you're spinning the roulette wheel. Next minute, your horses are on. And that was just part of the team culture. And then it gets a little bit more around the place. You see the racing post, you've got the horses on at lunch, and you break into the first team. And at the back of the bus on many away trips would be, the card club at the back, and you want to fit in, you want to be accepted. So you can find yourself quite quickly being involved around gambling. And that there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a great form of, camaraderie, team bonding, team building, all these things. It can be seen as positive. Unfortunately for me, once I had a few nasty injuries from that moment I just spoke about after that hat trick, that January transfer window, I had the options to leave. I decided to stay at Wrexham, my boyhood club, and 4 weeks after that, I broke my fifth metatarsal. I'd signed this new big contract. I was earning good money for a 20-year-old. And that moment, it was the first bit of adversity I'd ever come across. I think up until that point, there was a lot of hype around my name. At the age of 17, I remember playing for Wales and Ian Rush saying, Mark, you're going to be worth millions. And you're thinking that's Ian Rush.
Mhm.
And, you're getting picked for everything. So from a young age, it was captain of this, captain of that, straight into the county. You're captain of this. You're going to get a YTS, and you don't realize at the time there was only 5 of us that got these YTSs, youth scholarships,
Yeah.
and the other 11 just went by the wayside, and you forget about that because you're okay. You've got in, and then all of a sudden there's a bigger pool. You've got 3 years from the age of 15 to 18, you've got first year YT, second year, third year, all fighting for a professional contract. And from that, there's a good pool of 30 players. And then all of a sudden, only 4 or 5 get through. And luckily, I got through that. So at the age of 17, I was making my Football League debut. Again, a lot of the other players fall by the wayside. And you just keep going. And because I'd always been successful and kind of got what my goal was, that moment of being injured really just hit me hard. I didn't have the coping mechanisms as a 20-year-old, and I was gambling more and more, just to replicate the buzz of what I had just with the 6 months was phenomenal that season up until the injury. And then I came back from that. I thought I'd get back to normal. The gambling, was every day. It was online. It was accessible. I could do it from the changing room now. I could do it from the comfort of my own home. The money was going in, my football money. So that was almost funding the addiction at this point. Then I got injured again. I couldn't get back to that player I was. I couldn't get the form back. I was going, 5, 6, 7 games without a goal. Then my mind was overthinking that. And I got comfort in gambling away from the grass. I found it easier at the age of 21, 22 to get home and gamble than to actually face the music on a match day. I found it difficult out there, the criticism that came with it, social media, and it's worse now. I probably really struggle now with the social media platforms. But for me, I turned away from that and escaped what my reality was and turned to gambling to cope with them failings. And then unfortunately for me, which I'm sure we'll go into in terms of the transition, first of all, from full time to part time, and then to no time, if you want to call it that, to retirement. That transition to going to part time hit me really hard, and the gambling got worse.
Right. And I mean, we're both listening, and I really admire your candor with this because I think you've highlighted a journey that will be common to a lot of people.
Yeah,
And I think that balance, you're absolutely right. We've both been there. When you step into a team, you're trying to fit in. And
yeah,
pretty much anybody who's ever been on a team bus in any sport, traveling any sort of distance, will be familiar with a card school somewhere on the bus. And it is a rite of passage, and it is a sort of almost a, I've been asked to come and be a part of it. But that's where I think there's a responsibility, particularly on the senior players, to say, okay, it's a bit of fun, it's camaraderie, it's team building. It's not here to empty the wallet of young players and to sort of create additional pressures. But the accessibility, as you rightly say, has gone through the roof with the online access. So I think
yeah.
there's a whole raft of things to circle back to, but you're speaking so eloquently about this, Mark. Why don't you just step into what you were going to say there about the transitions? Because you've given us a sense of pressure, that high profile, everything's going well, new contract, income's coming in, injury, subsequent injury, the pressure's coming from all sides. It's in your own head. There's the external criticism that's coming in from the supporter base. Talk us through that first transition that you just alluded to.
Yeah, so like I say, the initial bit, I think inside me at the time, and this is where the transition, why I think it was so difficult. And I recently did a session for someone who was actually part of the management staff when I was 25, 26, which was in that transition. And I asked him a question in front of everyone as well. And I said, what was it like when you see me at 25? What was I like? You tell
Mm,
me what I was like around that dressing room, because obviously I was struggling. He didn't know I was gambling. They call it the hidden addiction. And his words were, he said, you were someone that was holding on and couldn't deal with what had just gone before you. And I couldn't have put it better myself. And that was just a man that was in a dressing room with me for 2 years. And
mm,
he just saying, just the way you were, it was almost like, and what I was living with when I went into part-time football was I was constantly referring back to that year and it's taken a long, long time to deal with, 17 goals in 20 games. I'm traveling away with Wales, get to the January transfer window. My agents ring me every day. Mark, you've got this club, this club, this club. I'm thinking, I've made it. This is great. You're speaking to your parents because they did everything for you to get that opportunity. Took me everywhere. My mum, dad, and nana came to every match for me and my brother. The best supporters, talk you away on a Friday night and they'd be there. And all of a sudden, that hype and everything, and you make that decision to stay. And then once the injury happened, then the next injury, within a year and a half, I'd watched myself go from the first name on the team sheet and being a wanted man to just getting pushed to the side.
mm,
I'd become a no one. It was like I was looking, I was coming back from injury again. I was trying again, and you're looking up, and I'm thinking, right, how many strikers there? You got him, yeah. Right, so I'm sixth choice at the moment. Then the manager who said to me, Mark, stay at Wrexham. You're with me now. I'll take you everywhere. I'm going to take you to the Championship. I'm Dean so I'm going to take you there. I'll get you in Wales seniors. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll sign there. Had it in the contract, worth this amount. But if Dean leaves, I can leave. And all of a sudden, that relationship's gone. Barely
mm,
speaking to me. I'm going in train every day. It's like I'm invisible. And then I'm thinking, well, what about that? Me and you?
mm,
Where's it going? And you're almost getting pushed further to the side. Then you go into reserves. I remember scoring a hat trick back to back on the Wednesday. Got a hat trick. Week after, got another hat trick. I thought, come on, this got to be put me on the bench. I thought Fleetwood away. Went on for 20 minutes. We were losing. I actually did well. And I remember getting on the team bus and my physio had been brilliant with me. It was Ritz and Lloyd. He'd been at Swansea recently. He came up, massive high five. I think he thought he's back.
mm,
This is his moment now. He's back in the frame. Week after, I was 17th man. No
mm,
conversation. I thought, why have I been left out again? And then the self-doubt, everything else you're going through. And it's like, oh, you're going out on loan now. So all of a sudden, it's like you're at a new club, you're trying to find your feet, and that's where it was really difficult. So the next part of with the gambling escalating, I went out on loan initially, then I signed at Kidderminster full time. But my football couldn't fund the addiction anymore. I weren't earning the money I was on at Wrexham.
Hmm.
So then the credit cards came in, then the late nights, then the behavior changed. So I started to just be angry. I was getting myself in a lot of trouble off the pitch. I was in debt. I was on my phone constantly in the dressing room. I wasn't focused. The what I learned my whole life to get to that point of working hard. You got to give it all because not many people make it. And I was so disciplined, determined that it just gone because now my new hobby was gambling. And then when I left Kidderminster, I went into part-time football. And that was the hardest transition because now I'd gone from a professional footballer to a part-time footballer. You're not seen the same. And then
Hmm.
all of a sudden, it's like you need to get a job. And then I was in the real world. And I remember I started coaching. I started working in a bar, doing things. And I remember people would see me and they'd say, "Thought you played football."
Hmm.
I say, "Oh, I still play part time. I've been at Chester. We just won 2 leagues. I've at Colwyn Bay. I'm captain of Colwyn Bay in the Conference North. It's only one off Wrexham." That's what I used to say. I
Hmm.
was almost trying to, I'm still okay. I'm still a good player.
Hmm.
Still trying to hold on to the fact that at the age of 20, I nearly moved to a big club and I couldn't let it go. But it was difficult. My identity of a professional footballer had well and truly gone once I went to part time.
Yeah, I mean it's very very powerful stuff that you're sharing here. And this, I suppose, the logical thing before we come back into some of these issues, Mark, is to go to where you are now. Just tell us, because there's a lot of lessons and a lot of things that we're going to draw out of this. But what are you doing currently? What, since you've stepped out of football, because we know you're a very passionate advocate about this, but it'll square the circle for the listeners to understand what you're now doing currently.
Yeah, so now I'm a senior consultant at Epic Global Solutions. So fortunately, today I travel around the world delivering gambling education and raising that vital awareness to elite athletes. So we work, as I say, it's global with the MLS, closer to home, the EFL, with EU athletes. So I've just recently been to Madrid, Amsterdam. So, that for me, I always look back and I can see the signs. I was a compulsive gambler at the age of 17, 18. I could see it. There was a couple of us in the dressing room. You could see we would stay in the bookmakers a little bit longer. We were on our phone. We were constantly wanting that next bet. And I think if I would have heard a Marc Williams story or other people that work at Epic, we've got Dominic Matteo,
Right.
Scott Davis, we've got other sports as well. We've got Nathan Corliss, the boxer, Jordan Spencer, the basketball player. So if I would have heard a story like that with the awareness of what potentially could happen and what it looks like, I might have been able to identify it a lot sooner. Whereas once I'd gone across a certain line, it was too much and I couldn't come back. So that's why I'm passionate about it because I think by certainly starting academies, helping the younger generation to see what potentially could go wrong, and we're never there to tell them not to gamble. As I said at the start, let it be fun, let it be safe, sociable, all them things gambling should be. But unfortunately, for the minority, it can go too far, which unfortunately it did for me.
And I think that's it's to your credit that you're in that space now. We talk a lot about accelerated learning. Very few people in life walk a path that nobody's ever walked on. And if you can tap into that knowledge and wisdom, well, you avoid the pitfalls, you find the hacks, the shortcuts, if you will, and you can get to that place more comfortably. So you've got all that intelligence, all that experience, bitter experience, and positive experience, as you said at the start. So you'll be fabulous in this role. I know you will be. But what are some of the key messages? Because you've identified some triggers that I think a lot of people relate to. You've talked about injury, you've talked about that loss of identity, and you've also talked a little bit about probably that sort of success at an early age when perhaps you've not experienced much adversity because your skill and your quality as a footballer, you've been representative, you've been captaining, you've been getting into the team, you have this wonderful season. So For those people that are listening, Mark, that are possibly either they're wrestling with the pressure and it's pushing them into it, or they're wrestling with injuries and it's pushing them into it, or they've had that success and they've got a sort of an abundance of cash coming in that they're not used to. What are some of the messages that you deliver to try and help people avoid it being as painful an experience as you had?
I think you need good people around you, good advice around you. Certainly, when you talk about a large amount of money around you, value your value for money is so important. I lost complete value for money, and I had good people around me. My mum, dad, and as I spoke, I had my brother that played as well. And they were with me every step of the way. Unfortunately, with something like gambling, it was easy to hide. And once I'd gone into it, it'd become a very lonely, isolating addiction, and the stigma around it. It was too embarrassing to tell anyone of the way I was behaving. So in terms of like the question, these players, as I say, I think good support networks, everything. I think being honest with yourself and people around you, it can be difficult. Professional sports cutthroat. I think we're coming out of it, and I can see that working with a lot of the clubs around the world. There's so much great work going on now in player care. We didn't really have that 20 years ago,
Mhm.
but I must admit now it's nice to see athletes because you'll be able to relate to this. It was a very macho man culture, and you didn't show emotion, and it was a case of you went in on the first day, at the age of 16. Here's the bleep test. How long can you run for? Here's your speed test. Here's your jump test. Here's your fat test. All these things physical, wasn't it?
Yeah.
If you get injured, you go into that room over there, the physio room. Not one person mentioned your
No.
mentality. And
No.
it's the biggest tool. It's the greatest tool you've got, and it's the majority of the game. And I think we've spoke about already injury. I can list many things why athletes are vulnerable. Certainly more susceptible to gambling, but it's just not gambling. It's everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
so many vices that athletes can turn to. You've got that you have got injuries, you then have the pressures, you've then got the stepping up into the first teams, and you've got the trying to replicate the buzz if you're not playing, or if you are getting sent out on loan, you've got to deal with that. Oh, you're not wanted this week. I spoke before, I thought I was back in the team at Wrexham the
Mhm.
week after I was 17th man. And you might not get told why. That's really difficult because your emotion of your mind, everything's going through your mind, and you don't know how to cope with that. Whereas I
Yeah.
think if you're strong mentally, I wish I could go back to be 17. And when I was going for them runs, when I was going to the gym, I wish I started meditating and doing mindfulness. And like now I do it every day. And I
Yeah.
did it from when I went into therapy at the age of 30, and it's changed my whole world. So 7 years of being calmer. I can deal with things now, setbacks, obstacles, because I'm still gonna, just because I'm not playing sport, it's life still throws curveballs at you. And you got to deal with it, but I can deal with it better, and I can, rather than being reactive to everything and angry and taking it out, or if I didn't get my own way in sport, manager dropped me, or I just react with anger.
Mm.
But the problem was I was ruining my reputation. And
Mm.
when I left Kidderminster, people spoke. He's hard work in the dressing room. Yes, I was
Mm.
struggling. However, my professionalism had gone, and I wasn't dealing with the emotion of sport. And I wish I was stronger mentally.
Yeah, and I think you've touched on something really powerful. Obviously, that sense of perspective and value in money was your first sort of
Yeah,
piece of advice, which is so important. And it's really interesting listening to you talk about support network because you're obviously from a close knit family, and this is a really interesting point of reflection for us because it's easy to say, oh, well, yeah, people struggle because they don't have anybody. And that's not the case. You had that close knit family, but you talked a few times about the embarrassment of showing any sort of vulnerability. And it's sometimes hardest to open up to the people that love you the most because
yeah,
you feel a sense of, well, they've driven me around, taxi service for years. I don't want to show weakness. And I think to your point, there are lots of alternative places to actually speak up. That's step number one. There's people in the clubs now, as you say, it's a
yeah,
very different landscape. There's welfare officers, there's sports psychologists, etc. Then you step out of the club, there's organizations like the one you're working with we spend a lot of time coaching and mentoring players. We're not saying we're addiction specialists in any way, shape, or form, Mark, but it's a safe space where you talk to people about what's challenging you at the minute, what is upsetting you from a mental health perspective,
Yeah.
and then you can signpost people. So I think it's having the courage to say, this isn't weakness. We've heard your story, captaining teams, playing representative honours, being a wonderful debut seat. There's no lack of skill or machismo in your story, and yet here you are now saying, I would have loved to have accessed mindset work, meditation,
Yeah.
development, because we're all the same. Our mind, whether you're playing golf, cricket, football, rugby, what goes on in here is very important to your performance. I think that's another really powerful lesson that you've shared. Explore who you can talk to and explore how you can improve your mindset, because it will tie back into performance. Now, just going into something that's maybe a little bit controversial, Mark, but I've worked in sport for a long time, so I can see both sides of this. Sporting clubs and organisations, they need revenue. But one of the challenges in the modern world that's even more prolific than it was in your era is online gambling and just the sheer scale of options. There's a bit of a disconnect that doesn't sit well with a lot of people. I know that there are so many betting companies involved in sport on the front of shirts, and then we're saying, hang on, be careful with the access. So it's a bit of a mixed message, and I suppose it's not backing you into a corner on that. I'm just interested in your perspective, because we're starting to see now, aren't we, in European competitions where whether you're going to have to change your strip, you can't have a betting company on the front of your shirt. Do you think that's the right direction? Do you think that's something we need to be wary of, or is it more, if you pivot into their world, they'll say, well, it's down to the individual and we need to educate the individual and it should be fun and don't block us out of the sport? What are your thoughts on that, Mark?
Yeah, well, we work at Epic Global Solutions. We work with the industry.
Right.
We work close. So when I was gambling, if you look at the three people, I knew I was gambling, the bank knew I was gambling, and the industry knew I was gambling. So potentially, who could have identified it? The industry could have helped, the bank could have helped, and the
Hmm.
work that we do now is to raise that education. So if more people are educated and have that awareness what can happen, and we're working closely with the industry, we're mitigating gambling harm. So we sit and train people that work in the industry. So we can say these are the conversations you need to have. This is what a red flag looks like on a phone call. This is what behavior looks like. So all them things that I used to do, and I think there's 25 lived experience at Epic now, and we can all use our lived experience to help. So yeah, the industry is going to make money, and the media naturally will always pick the bad stories. They don't see the great stuff either on the other
Mm.
side. And so then conversations that take place that are helping people use safer gambling tools, are helping people who are struggling. There's so much good work going on. So we're that side where we work closely with them to help. I don't blame the industry.
Hmm.
No, I certainly don't. I made them decisions. I think what I went through in sport played a big part, a critical part to that. Yeah, I couldn't cope with it. I couldn't cope with the injuries. I couldn't cope with the nearly story. And then when I transitioned to part-time and then feeling like I was no one, I gambled more. Now, it's
Mm.
not the industry's fault that I chose to gamble more and get credit cards. But, working closely together, hopefully then it allows the industry now are identifying more people that might have a problem that can go on and use safer gambling tools.
Yeah, yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. And just on a point around communication, Mark, I'm just curious on your perspective here, because it's a long time ago that Carl and I were playing, but some of your reference points were you're not selected by the coach or you're not in favour. And when you're young, particularly, you perhaps just fester on that. You get angry, you get frustrated. And actually, with the benefit of wisdom and age and maturity, and we both stepped into business subsequently, you realize, well, communication's a two-way thing. And without being disrespectful to coaches, not everybody likes the difficult conversations. It's the same in business as it is in sport. You've alluded to it. When you're flavour of the month and it's going well, it's easy to put your arm around that player. I'm going to take you all
Yeah.
the way to the top. When it's not going well, you shy away from it. Every sportsman and woman listening to this will have had those experiences where the coach couldn't do enough for them, and then the coach was becoming a little bit frosty.
Yeah.
One aspect we talk about is just get on the front foot respectfully and ask the questions, because you've used an analogy there. Well, I scored a hat trick and then I'm 17th man and I'm almost getting ignored. As a young player, it's difficult to have the confidence sometimes, but the only way to do it is to go and ask the question of, why am I not being selected? What do I need to do to improve? And how can I build a plan to get back in?
Yeah.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but does that resonate from your time, that you were like, there was those frustrations and those things building in your head that perhaps you wouldn't have got the answers you want, but perhaps you could have been more proactive in seeking feedback?
Yeah, I think it's a great question because I wasn't, and I'll give you a few examples. I wasn't great at it because when I've actually done what you've said to do, but the conversation backfired. But then unfortunately, I was that individual. I love numbers. That's why I probably like the roulette wheel, but I've got stats, facts. I have it all stored. So I can tell you I'd go in for these conversations that we're talking about. And I could tell you that the other strikers had not scored in 10 games, or,
Yeah.
that's how sad I was with analysing things. So I'd almost trump the managers, but and catch them out. But unfortunately, that's not going to get me anywhere, which just made it a bit like he's too cocky, he's too arrogant. So even the last part in the end of my career, I got it wrong. I got a situation wrong, and I think that just shows even with experience you'll get it wrong. So, going back earlier, at the age of Brian Little had just come in. He kind of pushed all the youngsters to the side. We were in a relegation battle, Wrexham at the time in League Two, and he weren't going to use us. So you're waiting round, and I was flying at the time. I was doing really well in the reserves, and every Thursday, I don't know where I got it from, really. I backed myself at that age. I think the hype again. I was going away with Wales 17s. Rush was saying these things. I just go knock on his door because we were losing. Wrexham were going to get relegated. And I'd knock on the door and I'd say, "Can I play on Saturday?" He was like, "No." I said, "I scored a hat trick yesterday." He went, "Yeah, I know." I said, "But you're not winning." And this is Brian Little. He managed Aston Villa. And he probably thought, "Who the hell do you think you are?" And he was like, "No." And then Chester actually came on, asked me to go on loan. And they were in there, they were at a higher level at the time. I said, "Well, can I go on loan?" "No, you're not going out on loan." "But I'm not playing." And I always, unfortunately, because I don't think it's a great thing, I always had an answer.
Mm,
And it'd
mm.
always be, "Well, if you're not going to play me, they'll play me. If you don't appreciate what I can give." And the Thursday after, to score again in the reserve, go knock on the door. And in the end, there was a friction between us. It wasn't a good relationship. And it wasn't until he got the sack. And as soon as he got the sack on the Friday, I started on the Saturday.
Right. And you
So,
see, this is the downside of it, but I would still advocate, and Carl and I have these conversations a lot. You're better to respectfully present the data, the argument, and not get anywhere than to have that mental pressure
yeah,
of, I don't know
agree.
what's going on. I don't know whether if I said this, it would make a difference. If you go and respectfully say, what can I do? And I think it's just because you're right, there's that competitive style of, you
Yeah.
should be playing me, you're losing, versus, well, I think I'm doing everything that you want. What more do I need to do? Tell me what I need to
Key
do. And
word
it's,
there is respectfully, isn't it? And I think certainly as a young lad, I didn't have that. So that was difficult. And then I'm going to take you all the way back to probably it was the last conversation I had with the manager. So I had the season at Caernarfon in the Welsh Premier, got into Europe, won Fans Player of the Year, adored by the manager. Um, Generally said to me, "You're my captain," but I weren't captain because the local lad was captain who'd been there for years, which, he was, great, quite quiet on the pitch, but a great lad. So it kind of made sense. They called him the coffee Messi. Loved playing with him. But he was like, "You're my captain." And the manager, he'd ring me all the time. "What do you think about the team here?" So all of a sudden they were talking, "Oh, could he come on the management to the board eventually when he retires?" So the relationship was good. The problem with that is the relationship can be where I'm then the vocal person in the dressing room. And I remember a moment just before the playoffs, we lost 5-0. And five or six players approached me about things they weren't happy with at the time. And we went round, we lost 5-0. We were 2 weeks away from going into the semi-final, and the feeling wasn't right in the dressing room. And the manager said, "What's going on? Something's not right. I know it. I can see." And he could see, I knew what was wrong. There was a little bit of breakdown in communication from the manager to some players. Certain players were getting pulled out when they thought they should be. All that goes on in sport. It's difficult. And I just, I was 36 at the time. I thought, I'll just say it. And I said, well, I think this. He was like, what do you mean? Then all of a sudden, I was, I put myself forward. But I put myself forward as the leader for the people. I was playing every week. I was on
Mm,
the team sheet. But it's what I believe in. I think people should get treated the same. I
mm,
don't care whether you're on that money. I don't care whether you've done that. I think you should, if someone plays well, they stay in the team. And I know there's hard decisions. So I kind of sticking up for them. And they had been texting me and they were down and I wanted them to, so I said it. And then I just felt after I got a phone call then a few days later, what did you mean when you said that? What do you mean? And I could just, and that was that. So I could tell
mm,
there was a bit in it. We got the semi-final when thankfully I scored in the 90th minute. Amazing feeling, but we scored in the 94th, so we actually went 2-0. But that was the moment, top off in the crowd. We're going into a final. We got through to Europe. And then I made probably another big mistake. So I still make them even at my age now. And I think it's just sport in general. It was the end of season do. You talk about people, teammates drinking. You can drink too much, fitting in again. Oh, you want to be Jack the lad. Drink too much. Few things were said. And I ended up falling out with the manager on that night. I don't think it's even public, but I'm okay with sharing it now. The team knew afterwards. From that one moment, I'd gone from being as captain on the pitch, going to be on thing. When I went back for pre-season for the Europa League games, barely spoke to me again.
mm, mm,
And I knew it was done. And when the penalty went in, it was the nicest feeling for everyone who over the last 7 years to this place. It was the hardest feeling being in a dressing room that I knew I wasn't wanted anymore.
mm.
Even though I just got fans playing. The fans loved me, but I knew
Yeah.
I wasn't going to break in. I knew I wasn't going to break in. So my last conversation was what you said, and I felt I was playing well enough again. I'd got in through injury to the others because if everyone was fit, now all of a sudden I didn't play, even though I played every game the year before. And I went for the conversation. I said, "Well, what do I do to get in?" He said, "It's my gut feeling." I said, "I can't play on your gut feeling. Tell me
Mm,
what I need to do." So I was trying to do it as a 36-year-old man, respectfully. What do I need to do then? I think I've played. So I went through all the games I've played. Well, your assistant said I was outstanding in that game. I played well in that game. And as I was doing it, I was getting faces pulled, going, as if he disagreed with it all.
mm,
And I thought, I'm wasting my time. And I
mm.
said, well, I'll have a think after this game. And I went on that day for 2 minutes. I mean, that was an insult in itself, with what I had done for the club. And I realized once I got in that change room, it was time to walk away. And that was the last time I played.
Well, even more candor, which we appreciate, Martin. I think it shows there is no silver bullet, unfortunately. When
No.
it comes to communication, I think again to your credit, what you've shared is you sometimes get it right, you sometimes get it wrong. There's a time and a place.
Yeah.
Delivery matters.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, how many of us can't hand on heart say we've not said something we regret if we've had a couple of drinks? I think most of us have been in that space. So there's
Yeah.
there's context and there's learnings and there's wisdom in all of this. And
Yeah.
sometimes it just doesn't fit. Sometimes you just don't fit with a coach or philosophy. You've talked about some coaches like brilliant, some coaches not so good. We've all been there. And sometimes, despite your best endeavors, you're
Yeah.
not going to be in the team automatically. Someone else can perform not as well.
Yeah.
And
That, and that
and
and that's
knowing that,
that's what was happening. And I think the hardest bit for that, I'd gone from no the year before I might have had an off game. I knew I was going to play this. So I was getting, I guess people were getting treated. Then people that I stuck up for the year before, it was now happening to me. And it's hard when you're on the other side of the fence, isn't it?
yes.
But
But knowing it happens, Mark, I think that's the
yeah,
important thing because people who are fighting those demons, as you called them earlier,
yeah,
where it's pushing them into addiction, whether that's drink or alcohol, saying or gambling. Sometimes it's not you. Sometimes, yes, you've created it through your form or through your communication style. Sometimes you just don't fit. You're not the right gut feel for a coach, and there's not a lot
yeah.
you can do. So,
Like,
so, so knowing that might
yeah,
help push
yeah. I think
people
that
from
could.
into the demons, as it were.
And that can help athletes, you generally. I mean, that was the word. I said, well, I've played in that. Tell me what I need to do for you to be in this team. Bear in mind, I'd done what I'd done and got player of the year before. oh, it's my gut feeling. So yeah, unfortunately, there's moments where you can do everything. You can train better than anyone. You can work harder than anyone. And at that moment, someone will get picked ahead of you. And that's okay. And I think it's so important. Don't take that as a reflection on yourself, but
Exactly.
and it doesn't mean that you're a failure. Unfortunately, I took that as I'm not good enough again. But
Yeah.
I felt that my whole career. Every time something like that happened, you think you're not good enough. You have then the self-doubt. Whereas at
Yeah.
that point, that's where athletes need to go. I am good enough. I'm going to keep working harder. You get players going the other way. Oh, what's
Yeah.
the point? I'm not going to do that. Oh, I'll go out drinking now on the weekend. I'll go and eat
Yeah.
that food. That whole structure of what they're trying to do goes because the manager might not be playing them, and you've just got to have the other mindset saying, no, it's fine. Someone's going to see what I do
Yeah.
because there's someone out there.
And you can find case studies of this in every sport, Matt. We're talking about football today, but you can find people who are in fabulous form and then they have a
Yeah,
dip. There isn't a sportsman or woman alive that hasn't had a dip. You know, the British Open was on this week. You're talking about golfers that had dropped from being in the top 10 to outside the top 200. Then they come back. There's been cricketers that can't get out of single runs and then they score centuries. There's
yeah,
strikers who can't score a goal, then they score them. I remember watching the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. Patrick Mahomes, who was like everybody's MVP, you know, he's done it all. He's the poster boy of the NFL. He can do no wrong. Subsequent Super Bowls, then the opening quarter, it's like he's playing worse than sort of a school quarterback. Everything he touched went wrong. Does that mean he's a bad player? No, he just had a bad moment. And
yeah.
your point is so important that you don't then go, well, quit. I'll just drink. I'll eat. I'll do. Hold the discipline to keep going because nobody is man of the match every week. It's impossible.
And I'll be honest from that. I mean, this might help people as well. As I got the information that I didn't want to hear, my gut fit, it started getting tit for tat. And in the end, it was an uncomfortable conversation. So what went in with me trying to be mature and I unfortunately then you start stepping over the line. It becomes, one of them awkward conversations. And I think it's important for athletes in that moment, you might not, I didn't agree with what you
Mm,
said. However, I should have just said, "Yeah, okay, I respect your decision. I'll keep going, and
yeah.
I'll hopefully break in." And I look back now, I knew it was time. I felt it was time after the penalty, and that was the moment. And then I thought, right, I'm going to go and spend time. I'm not wasted as a part-time footballer my weekends when I'm traveling away all week when I've got a family that are waiting for me. And it becomes a bit of a sacrifice then,
Mm,
doesn't it? And it's like, what's more important? And in that moment, I just wanted to, I didn't want to be abided by the fixture list anymore. And I knew it was time. However, I do miss it. And I
mm,
wish, would I have been able to turn it round maybe if I would have just said, okay, I'll take that, right? I'll be ready when you need me. I
mm,
know he might have gone, hang on a minute, because my reputation probably told him if I keep blanking him, he's going to react. And I did. And then
mm,
and and it's sad that what was the greatest end to my career, there was a little bit at the end where I regret. So I still sit here with a little bit of regret. Hence the reason I'm half, do I go back just to get rid of this little bit of regret? But then it was one moment, it was one manager
mm. And
who
and I,
said,
again, we'll keep using the word candor, Mark, and you've been so candid throughout. But there's very few sportsmen and women, again, that we've spoken to that don't have elements of regret. The benefit of this podcast, I think, is we're listening to the wisdom and the benefit of hindsight when you're
yeah,
cool, calm, and collected. So people can think about that and say, when your blood's up, when your ego's being challenged, and you fundamentally disagree with the coach, being able to say, but you're in charge of selection. So now's the time for me to stop, bite my tongue, and exit,
yeah,
which is really hard when you've
brilliant.
been
Yeah.
provoked and your
But,
ego's
but
there.
it's the right advice.
It's the right advice with the benefit of hindsight.
This has been a fascinating conversation, Mark. And just to reiterate what James has said, your candor has been amazing. And this is almost a bit of a public new world for James and I. It's been a bit of a conversation in our one-to-one coaching sessions, but to publicly talk about this is a very new area, but one that's insanely necessary and prevalent to today's world. But I just want to dig a little bit more into what it is you're doing now with Epic Solutions. And you mentioned earlier about red flags and behaviors. Could you just sort of enhance on that a little bit more from two different angles? So one from a player's perspective in what could and should they be looking out for that may identify an addiction? But then also from a teammate, a coach, or a management perspective, what could they be looking out for some of their players that may signal we might need to have a conversation with this guy just to make sure everything's okay?
Yeah, well, I always look certainly back to my behaviors. So I think the one is the mobile phone, but it's not enough anymore. 20 years ago, it probably was because mobile technology wasn't what it is today. Everyone's on their phone, aren't they? So if someone's always on their mobile phone, I think back to moments in my change room. It wasn't the case I was always on my phone. It was the visibility of my phone. So I wouldn't let anyone see my phone. So I'd be
Mm,
getting myself in positions. So it's almost like where only I can see my screen.
mm,
I'd be going into the bathroom with my phone. During half time, I'd be getting my phone and pouring it on into my warm up top and taking it to the toilet, shut the door, and then checking the bets. That was the norm. It became the
mm,
norm. Then it's the other things. It's the lack of professionalism. It's the turning up, whether it's late to training or if you have to be in at 10 and you're in every day, bang on 10 or just after, and you're the first one out. And I always remember Dean Saunders saying it to me. The gambling was taken over. So all of us, I mean, you know what it's like for a professional athlete. You can be done by 12, especially as a footballer. Rugby's a little bit
yeah.
different, lads, which you're probably thinking 12. Uh, we had to be in at 10 and you training pitch for half 10, you could be done by 12. And what you'd see is when you're professional and you're on, and it's everything to you, you're in at 9, you're in the gym, you're doing your rehab work, you're doing your weights, you can have breakfast at the club, it's all there for you. Then you're out at on the training ground, then you finish at 12. You've got the player that walks in, gets the shower, goes for food, and is in the car park. And then you've got the player who is doing shooting. And I remember when Dean first came in, he used to come with a bag of boys. Brilliant for me, he was at the time. And we just did shooting all afternoon. And I didn't want to go home, didn't want to be
Mm,
anywhere else. I wanted to be on that training pitch. And it was every angle. And I actually coach that today now with the younger generation. I do a lot of coaching in my spare time. And he taught me that. And I look back to that and I remember when that stopped, the gambling was taken over. I was now getting home for once so I could continue gambling, get to
mhm,
William Hill, was in the bucket chair rather than being on the training ground. And he said to me, "You're now the last one in, sprinting in at 10 o'clock with the bag over my shoulder and the first one out." He recognized that, but he didn't see that as, is there a problem? He probably just thought he's not interested anymore. But it
right.
was actually because the problem had emerged. So that's a good one. The
Yeah.
professionalism, the socializing's huge. I hated Christmas dues. I mean, I loved them at the back end where, that should be the best time. You're with the team, a little bit, let your hair down, have a few drinks. It's all the banter. And that socializing and being around, it was hard enough being around the Monday to Friday with a fake smile, that facade that everything was okay. So to then socialize more, and what you'd find is then people would be like, oh, we're meeting on a Sunday, we're going to watch that match. And I wouldn't entertain that. So you can almost see the social circle, the ones that are, you'll have quiet players, you always will, but when all of a sudden you're not on the social events, all the Christmas nights out, you don't want to be there, and you're very, you know, almost standish off from your
Hmm.
teammates. Potentially there could be a problem there. Behavior, I think that was the biggest one for me. Unfortunately, I became really angry and aggressive with it. So I was, in training, I'd kick out, I'd be reactive. I'd fall out of managers. I'd be like, as I said, I'd go knock on the door while I'm not playing. And again, it wasn't respectfully. So I was like a fizzy bottle of
Mm,
pop waiting to blow up. And if something didn't go my way, if Marc Williams didn't get his own way, I'd blow up
mm,
and deal with emotion. That tells me that something isn't quite right. I mean, you can't just blow up constantly. And I
mm,
was, and I was falling out with players. I remember at one of the clubs, we were 2-0 up. We were going for the playoffs at the time. We drew 2-2. A lad came on and he just weren't pulling his weight. And I was captain at the time. But my anger and aggression, my manager actually really liked. It was the way he played. So you could call it almost bullyish way of, ranting and raving. He thought he wants to win.
mm,
He's seen it the other side. So I gave it into the style like the night before. I've lost thousands. And
mm,
then all of a sudden he's cost me the win. And I was reactive in the dressing room and we ended up fighting in the dressing room. He actually gave me a good black eye as well, fair play to him. But I look back at moments like that, think, who did I think I was? How
Mm,
was I behaving like that? But I was mentally not in a great place. And
mm,
I went home, I had my black eye, and I regretted it instantly. And then I'd
mm,
break down and cry, and I'd be like, and I didn't want to go train. I had to text the manager, I don't want to go. And she was like, no, you're coming, you're the captain. And I
mm,
hated it. And then there was a divide in the dressing room then. So,
mm.
yeah, the reactions, anger, there's quite a lot of behavioral things you can see.
Yeah. Yeah, very powerful set of traits and issues to look out for, Mark. But again, the power in this is that it's a great question from Carl. You're looking for it in yourself
Yeah.
and you're looking for it in others. And it isn't just to the point you made earlier that perhaps Dean Saunders thought he doesn't care. Well, what's the underlying cause?
Yeah.
And that's what we've got to get towards, isn't it?
And it's good. I think the staff one's great. I do a lot of staff sessions, and as I said, there was a staff member that was in my recent one. I've met up with my old physio, and it was good to get his perspective of it because he was watching me go from that player to not playing. And I was in the treatment room every morning with him, and he said, you just became, I was quite loud. I was always confident, but I'd gone very quiet in Wrexham. I'd gone very subdued, almost like, and I'd moan. He'd go, "Oh, you're in on Sunday." I'd be like, "What for? I'm in a cast. What do you want me to do?" It's like you had given up and like you hated Wrexham all of a sudden. But as he said at the time, and he said he's seen it go out on Scorio about the gambling. He didn't know, and he messaged me straight away. So I'm so sorry I didn't see it. I said, "Well, why would you see it?
Mm.
It's education. Why would you know that I was struggling with gambling?" And there was times like, oh, is everything okay? Because he could see something wasn't right. But now, probably with the tools he's got, the fact that, oh, Mark did gamble. Look, I remember his behavior. All of a sudden, he can put it together. He said, if it happens again, I know now to approach someone. Is
Yeah.
everything okay? You don't seem the same. You're quiet. You're
Yeah.
subdued. You're not yourself. Your personality's changing. Are you okay? You don't even have to mention gambling. We
Yeah.
advise them not to, but just be there as the support line. And when they're ready, someone will come into it if there's a safe space.
So, Mark, something that we talk to all ex-athletes about is transferable skills, little things that they take from their career into their life beyond sport. You're obviously very much in that sweet spot now where you're constantly talking to existing athletes, coaching staff, managers, etc. Is there anything that you would touch on in terms of transferable skills, things that you still do today that you have taken from your sporting career into this next chapter?
Yeah, I think as athletes, I think what I and speaking to a lot of ex-athletes myself, I think one of the big things we struggle with is the change of that structure that we've been under for so long. So you have to be in on a Monday morning, you've got this, you're on a timetable your whole life, and then all of a sudden that stops, the identity goes, and you don't quite know what to do with it. And I guess that's why so many athletes turn to coaching, management. It keeps them in there. So for me, in the role I play as a senior consultant, it could be going in to deliver sessions. It's public speaking, essentially going to conferences. The best way, because I'm still an athlete, I got, it's in my DNA. So to keep it in me, I kind of, when my diary, I look at my diary and I think, right, I'm speaking at that club, I'm doing that on that conference, I'm doing that club. That's my match day.
Hmm.
Because my whole life I've been geared up. You're playing on Saturday, Tuesday. So every bit of prep that goes on is for them outcomes. So the only way I can transfer that is, right, I'm in there on Friday, today's Tuesday, and it would be just building into it. So for now, I have my presentation, I've got my delivery, what's the audience? So I'm preparing everything. I guess that side of it would be the nutrition, the go in the gym. It's all the things you need to go and perform on that day. So everything, pre-match is getting sorted. So like I say, it'd be my laptop stuff, my delivery. I've got my clicker, everything's ready. I'm okay. And interestingly, as I'm building into it, then it's the bit similar again. How far away is it? Do I need an overnight stay? I want to have good sleep. I always wake up. I'll go and go to the gym. I'll have a good healthy breakfast. So even though, I can, if I want, eat bad now if I want. I don't need to be healthy, but I can't. I'll never come out of
Mm.
that healthy lifestyle in the week. That go in the gym. It keeps me in the best shape, mentally and physically. So I'm still going out on that day to go and deliver. And then obviously when it's the day to deliver, that's my match day. And it's very difficult to replicate the buzz of sport. And that's why some people do turn to gambling. It could be drugs, it could be alcohol, because they can numb the pain, but it can take you to that high.
Mhm.
Scoring that winning goal, nothing takes you there. It's very difficult to hit. Spinning a roulette wheel with thousands on can take you there, unfortunately. And for me, though, when I'm in a room and you've got a team of people and they're waiting for you, you're in control. They're there for you. You're giving them the session, and that's the high bit then. And
Mhm.
you can go out and perform, and it's like, this is my moment. I'm on the pitch, and off you go, and you put all that. You've been training. You've had your training from to be a better facilitator, all these things we constantly do at Epic Global Solutions to be the best facilitator. And I guess that's preparing us for the match day. And I like that philosophy I have. It just keeps me as if I'm in the game.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's so powerful for any existing athlete looking. Oh, I like that structure. It's all about discipline. It's all about
Yeah.
professionalism. It's all about leaving no stone unturned to get the best out of yourself. And actually, what's also nice is you can get that buzz in different environments.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, "Well, I can't ever get it," and you're right. There's certain moments scoring the winning goal. It's hard to replicate, but actually, you get a lot of satisfaction and buzz from standing up and presenting and making an impact. So it's again just another piece of validation that it's not the end of a chapter and that's it. It's all downhill. Actually, it's about identifying where can that buzz come from? What do you
Yeah.
enjoy? What are you into? And then applying that professionalism. I think this whole conversation has been stacked full of wisdom. So in some respects, my last couple of questions might be a little bit redundant, but nonetheless, I'm still going to challenge you with them. So we always ask everybody one do, one don't to make their transition a little bit easier. Now, it feels like from the very moment you started speaking, you've been sharing advice, insight, and wisdom. But if you could distill it down and say, right, you're talking to the young players coming behind you, something that you should absolutely do and something you shouldn't do, what comes to mind to help them have a more successful transition into life beyond their professional chapter?
I think a do for me would be setting goals. Didn't really do it growing up. Didn't really. I want to be a professional footballer. And then the problem with that is when things didn't go to plan, I'm off script straight away, and I
Mhm.
struggled with that. And again, when I went into therapy at 30, they told me to do these things. Some of them were personal. Being a
Mhm.
better dad, being a better son, and a partner, all them things. And then other ones were professionally. And I actually wrote, and I weren't even in this space. I said I want to deliver to football league clubs, gambling education. I didn't know it existed. And
Mhm.
and I had it as a medium goal. I had short, medium, and large, long-term goals. And on medium, that I thought year and a half, 2 years, 3 years maybe. I've got to find something. And I started to I went on social media and just delivered. I was giving help out on social media, free, just my voice, a few stories, and then all of a sudden someone got in touch, and it was just over a year, and I found myself in my first EFL club. But the goal was there, and I ticked it off. And having them in front of me, and I had them next to my bed. It sounds weird now, doesn't
No,
it?
it's not. It's
I
not.
I woke up every morning. I went through a really tough period in COVID. I was having my little girl at the time, 2 nights a week. That was tough. And then now I've got 50%. So that's better. But at the time, I didn't have my partner who I've now been with 4 and a bit years. But so I was it was lonely, but it was the best part of the recovery I needed to love me again. And what I did is I had a motivational wall and I just put things up. And I guess I was setting up for the next part of my life. And it had some nice parts of my career that I could see that I'd done, but it also had things that I didn't want to be perceived again. And the anger was in there. There was a few quotes. And it was just there. And every morning I lived in it. Even
Mhm.
at night, if I was listening to podcasts on my bed, or I could see it all and just read, and the goals were there. And I ticked them all off. And, even though there was some that were very long term, I actually achieved all of them in a very short space of time. So the do's is get your goals, see them every day, and go and chase them, because it's
Yeah.
amazing how quickly you'll go and achieve them when you can see it.
Again, I'm smiling as you're talking because one of the things we talk about all the time, if you haven't got clarity on where you want to go, how are you going to build a plan to get there? And we get stuck in the moment. And what you
Yeah.
just identified perfectly is this is one of my medium-term goals. And lo and behold, your brain says, that's where you want to go. Okay, let's make that happen. And now you're doing it. So absolutely love that. What about the don't, Mark? What comes to mind there?
I think sometimes, I mean, I didn't know I was going to go and do what I do today. And I don't, I think so many players come to the end of their careers like, do I want to coach that? So for me, I mean, who thought I'd do gambling education? I had to have all the horrible middle bits on my CV. It's probably the only job you can get from having a really bad CV. But I wouldn't I wouldn't say it's that. I'd be flexible and adaptable for your next journey. Because for me, I think you've got to do, especially when you've played sport your whole life, because it's what you love as a kid and you've been fortunate enough to do it. You've got to be passionate and love what you do. And for me, I don't work. And that might sound really bizarre because I do a lot of traveling, whether it's in the air, on the road, and I go to and I go and deliver, and then I'll do because I love what I do and I'm passionate about it. I don't feel like it's work. And if you can find yourself something that you love, you're passionate, go and chase it, because then you'll feel like you've got a purpose every morning to wake up for.
Yeah, yeah. Well said. Well said. So, quick fire. Last couple of things
Yeah.
to finish. And again, I almost make these questions redundant, but I'm pleased I asked that because you gave two absolute belters to the do's and the don'ts. But we've started just dropping in two or three really quick questions at the end, Mark. So, best piece of advice you've ever received? It could be sport related, life related, doesn't matter. Something that somebody said to you that you're like, yeah, that really sticks as one of the best things I've ever been guided to do.
I would say it was guided. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of advice because it's on the spot. It's quite difficult. I've had lots of good advice off a lot of good people. And I mean, with it being the day today, if you haven't heard the news, Coach Joey Jones passed away today. So obviously, send my condolences to family. He was amazing inspiration to me. He was my youth team, reserve team manager, and he gave me probably the best advice, more on resilience and strength, to be honest. And with what he achieved in his career. Um, he was fantastic. So there was so many things that he did for all of us. He gave us all hope, to be honest, and gave everyone a chance, regardless who you were. So he was a great man with probably gave me the most inspiration. But from that, and it was actually a really dark night, and not meaning dark 'cause it was night. Just I just wasn't in a great place, and I was looking for that guiding that you've just mentioned.
Mm.
I went for a walk. I often tried to go for a walk or get at Archie. You're there tossing and turning, thinking, what's next? I wasn't in the space I was doing now. I didn't feel pretty great about myself. The damage had been done really. And I went for a walk throughout the night. And on the side, and I'm not religious in that sense, but there was a sign and it was a religious quote. And it just basic, really. It just said, you find hope when you give it someone else.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
you find hope when you give it to her. And at that point, it hit me because not, it's hard as a footballer. I think you can become, because of the ego and the character and the big in it, you can become quite self-centered. It
Mm.
becomes about you. Sometimes I won football matches and it wasn't enough because I hadn't scored. You,
Mm.
and it's a bit like, come on, you're a team, and you can go away from team because you're on this your own personal journey, yet you're in part of all these teams, and it's so difficult. I remember that night I thought, oh, yeah, and from that point, that's been my quote to go with, and I feel since I've started doing more for other people and not making it about me, and helping a lot of people and going out my way for people, I feel like I'm getting something back.
Mm.
I look at the places I go to, and I'm really fortunate. Count myself lucky. Sometimes I pinch myself. How am I here?
Yeah.
And I think, no, I want to keep being a good person, keep being the best version of myself, helping people, giving something back. And in a weird way, this universe will reward you. And I feel that's what it's doing. So,
Yeah, love that.
help
Love that.
people.
Love the context in which you found it and the
Yeah.
power of those words. I think that's a fabulous one. Is there a particular book that's had an impact on you, Mark? You're obviously pretty reflective. You always talk about listening to podcasts, etc. It might not be a book, it might be a podcast, but again, we like to ask people, is there anything that's had a real impact that they can then someone else can go and seek that out as well? So I don't know if it's a podcast or a book during this journey that you've been on that's had a particular impact on you.
There's lots I read all the time now. I've just reading the book, the Mal Robbins one with Let Them.
Right?
Unfortunately, in sport, you can get caught in politics and what people think of you. You're not going to be liked by everyone. I've really struggled with that, especially since the gambling and ex-teammates and managers that particularly probably don't like me. I have been known as Marmite because of my personality, and
Right.
so I struggle with that. So I've been trying to that's their interpretation. Let them. So I quite like things like that. And there's lots
Yeah.
of power of now being present in the moment. Obviously, for not being present for so long. So there's lots of books out there. Lots of I love listening to high performance podcasts to get that inspiration to keep being better.
Yeah.
But I think one for me, you might have heard it, you might not have. It was I woke up every morning to it. It's an 8 minute on YouTube. Inky Johnson.
Right.
Uh,
Oh, is he the American footballer that lost his
yeah.
arm
Got
yes.
injured.
Yeah.
And it talks about how, he was close to making it big time and he'd made it and he'd had, deprived childhood and he was doing it for his mum and in the end the moment came and then he got injured and the doctor would say, obviously you can't play anymore. He's like, no, I have to play. This is it.
Mm.
This is my journey. So I think it's quite great for something that you're doing here. He actually changed his journey and became a motivational speaker from the circumstances he went through.
Yeah.
And it's great, and he's amazing. But that 8 minutes, you every morning the alarm would go off. I'd wake up early because I was going to do my meditating. I'd have that for 8 minutes. That inspired me to make me realize that it's okay that I'm not a professional footballer and I didn't achieve what I wanted to, and I didn't fulfill my potential. But I tell you what, I'm going to go and achieve it in the second part of my career. That was really inspiring. It got me through, like I say, them dark times.
Well, Mark, I think it's a wonderful place to pause and say, I think that's a fabulous anecdote of where you derived inspiration. But I'm certain, Carl, I'm sure you'll be nodding your agreement that this will inspire a lot of other people as well. I think, it's to your absolute credit that you've spoken so candidly. I think you've talked about some of the highs and the lows that you've gone through. You've humanized it, and I know that people will take a lot of strength from that. So I suppose the final question from us is, if people do want to connect and they do want to find you, where's the best place to do that, Mark? Would it be LinkedIn? Would it be your website? How do people find you if they want to follow up on what they've heard today?
Not in William Hill anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be LinkedIn. To be honest, I don't. Social media for me, it's like I say, it's a funny world, isn't it? So
It is.
I like LinkedIn. I
Yeah,
find it more professional. So if anyone did want to, connect and hook up, LinkedIn would be the one. And I quite like that. I think you get a lot of inspiring stories on LinkedIn and good people who, like they can help you.
yes,
And although we say don't scroll through your phone, sometimes I think 10, 15 minutes of the right stuff on LinkedIn can be really helpful. So yeah,
absolutely.
LinkedIn would be the one. And it's obviously just Marc Williams, and Epic Global Solutions is who I work for. So it's easy to find.
Yeah, and we'll put those connections into the show notes. So, Mark, huge thank you. We've both
Very
thoroughly
welcome.
enjoyed this. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and wish you the very best of luck with everything that you're doing with the coaching, the consulting, the speaking. I know you're going to have a great impact with everybody that you interact with.
No, thank you. Thank you both very much.
Thanks for joining us this week on our ATA podcast. If you found this conversation insightful and it resonates with your journey, please subscribe, follow the show, and stay connected with us for more insights, resources, and information on how we at ATA are supporting your preparation for life beyond the game.